RevOpsAF, the only podcast for people who are RevOpsAF and want to learn all about things that are RevOps AF.
Our goal is to give the revenue operations community, that includes marketing, sales, and CS, for any of you not paying attention, the skills needed to accelerate their careers.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the RevOpsAF podcast. I am here with Sandy Robinson, who is the SVP of Revenue Operations and Enablement over at Patra Corporation, not Patra, not Petra, Patra Corporation. And today we're going to be talking all about alignment and how RevOps can help drive alignment across marketing, sales, and customer success. And then one specific piece of the RevOps role and function, which is mapping process to systems and technologies. Sandy, thank you for joining and being willing to drop some expertise, but maybe give us a little spiel and rundown on yourself, a quick introduction, anything I didn't add there.
Awesome. Appreciate you having me. Super excited to be on this podcast, Matt. So I am a salesperson at heart. So I started way back in the day hustling Yellow Pages advertising. That's where my roots are. So I'm really in tune with managing the business and expectations with sales leaders and all the revenue leaders in the organization. Through the years, I was really obsessed with the systems and the reporting and training, and then sales ops came along. And so that's how I made that transition. I've been at Patra for about almost a year and a half now. And really, it's the first RevOps function that Patra has had. So there's been a lot of work around alignment, setting up process, compensation, systems, you name it. So we're a little team, a little RevOps team, but we are a mighty team. And I'm just pumped up to be here and chat about it with you.
Yeah, that's awesome. So before we get into some of the specific experiences that you've had at Patra, tell us, what is your definition of revenue operations, or how do you define RevOps? And then we can use that to level set and get into some of the details again about your experiences.
So I was thinking about this when we were going back and forth on the email, and the way that I position this in our organization is the purpose of RevOps is to drive revenue faster through scalable processes that enable us to grow. So everything that impacts the customer buying journey and any ability for us or inability, friction that causes us to potentially have challenges bringing revenue in the door or growing revenue. So those are the areas that I think revenue operations team should focus on. And that includes every aspect of the customer buying journey, in my opinion.
Yeah, I love that. I like to focus on faster, being more effective, more efficient. It's not just doing anything, but it's how can you do it better? And so you talked a little bit about, so I guess with that definition, you talked about process, technology a little bit, but also when you mentioned coming into Patra over the last year and a half, that they were maybe new to RevOps or been the early stages of building their RevOps function. And obviously, I'm sure in your career, you mentioned slinging Yellow Page ads and doing the sales op thing too. There's where you start will definitely impact the speed at which you get to where you want to go. And companies, as they start down this whole RevOps journey, you wind up starting from maybe two different places. One is maybe you have the benefit of being an early stage company, or at least early on in your journey. And so you haven't really had any sort of prior like operations models, right? And so you're just like, oh, RevOps, right? That's the thing to do. Let's do that. You start on the RevOps path. Or you could be companies like Yellow Pages and a bunch of these other older, larger organizations who have now been doing maybe the silo department specific, like the sales team, sales operations. You have the marketing team with their marketing operations, the CS team with their CS operations, and trying to get them to move to more like a unified kind of model can be hard. What does maybe alignment even mean when you're looking at revenue operations? And then how should one approach driving that alignment if you're in revenue operations in both of those examples, where maybe you're starting fresh or you're coming from the old way?
Yeah, great question. So I do have experience in both startup-y land and the fun of grinding and starting from scratch. And in my current role, Patra is an 18-year-old company. So there are definitely a lot of functions that are doing great things in the organization in different silos. So I think if you're in startup mode and you have the ability to start with nothing, there's going to be priorities, right? So you're focusing probably more on marketing ops, right? Because you have to build the top of the funnel, and then that transition to sales operations and building those BDR and SDR compensation plans and your hunter plans and all of these things. But you have to be mindful of it. We are going to close customers, and we do have to set this up for success in a future customer success model. So I think it has a lot to do with the stage of the organization. In a company like Patra, when there was a sales operations function and a marketing operations function, but they were definitely very much siloed in the organization. So I've had the ability to come in and to streamline some technology to make it easier, to revamp some processes and revamp compensation plans to align with that. And I think that's a critical element of revenue operations in any role, is to be thinking about not only aligning all the process and the tech and lead to SQO and all that stuff, but how are these folks that are going to help build the company going to be motivated? How does the compensation also align with that? So those are some big areas. So I think you have to really jump in and prioritize with the goals of the company, where the company is in their growth journey. Are they Series A, Series B? Are they in scale up mode, or whatever the case may be? So you really have to think about the future, but you've got to think also in the moment.
Yeah. And so you came in to Patra, you mentioned the company's been around for a while. You came in about a year and a half ago. So I guess I'm curious, what did things look like with the RevOps team at Patra on day one? And how do those look now, like a year and a half later, and like specifics, right? Like how big was the team? What were they focused on? Even like what were their job titles? And what did you change? And then also what did you keep the same? And why? To help get at the alignment piece that we were just talking about.
Yeah. So one of the first things that I did was I brought in a great architect or admin. And I say architect because it's one thing, okay, if you're a certified Salesforce admin or HubSpot admin or whatever your CRM is, and having that expertise is important. But having somebody who thinks more strategically around how do all the systems work together, and then with complexities in the organization where there may be proprietary systems you have to connect to and all these other things. So for me, that was a really strategic role to bring in to the organization, because there wasn't a quote admin per se in the organization. There were a lot of folks that were helping out and maintaining HubSpot and doing those sorts of things. But for example, stages weren't consecutive. Salespeople were creating deals at stage 4, and we didn't really have much of a pipeline or forecasting process. The first thing I did was try to get that RevOps or that architect in place, and I found somebody that actually worked with in a prior world, and she came in, and we spent basically the fourth quarter rebuilding the entire deal structure in HubSpot to where we aligned the process. So we identified the entry exit criteria and things like that, mapped out the process, and then created completely new deal types, a new way to calculate calculations on deals and things like that, and implemented that as of January 1. So starting from January 1, 2024, we have clean data in HubSpot and from a sales process perspective. So that was a huge project, and that was the highest priority. So as I looked at the job when I first started, it really was more focused initially in the sales operations world and focusing on that opportunity journey as we got started.
That makes sense. And so you brought on, and I like the way you positioned that, you brought on, like you said, and like a systems architect, basically, right? Someone to help end to end. Not someone who is just a dedicated HubSpot administrator, Salesforce administrator, but someone who could really work across the spectrum. And so it sounds like one, that was a net new resource. Did you do anything with the current resources that you had in terms of shifting either their focus or responsibilities?
Yeah. So we just defined what the analyst role looked like. And a lot of that is more reporting and focusing in on, we do have a lot of other systems that we haven't integrated yet because it takes time to do these things. And again, it's an 18-year-old company with a lot of disparate systems and data. We have a level of manual work that needs to get done, reporting and things like that. So just really honed in a little bit more on what the analysts needed to support career path and journey and things like that. And then I serve the role of enablement. So we rolled out completely new consultative selling, MedPick, and we worked with force management to do that. But I'm certified to teach MedPick. So I do a lot of the training and I put together an onboarding plan. So we brought in, I think a total since I've been here, 15 new sales folks in various roles. Some roles were new that we created. And so I had to put together like an effective onboarding. So there's a 90-day RevOps onboarding program. It's pretty basic, but I onboarded myself. So I created it and I went through it myself with the people we hired I think in like June, July of 2023. And so it was really, I think, important to be thinking strategically. So how do we now embed our new processes, MedPick, consultative selling, and those pieces are critical. And where I think it's important for RevOps leaders to be thinking about is enablement. So not every company it has enablement under revenue operations. So I have a sales background, sales training, like I rolled out Challenger way back in the day. And I obviously have the sales chops and I enjoy that stuff and teaching and things like that. So it's part of my organization. It's not part of every RevOps leader's organization. But when you think about functional responsibility, whether or not enablement reports to the RevOps leader, it's critical to have that partnership. So as we rolled out the new systems training, so we had to train people. So we had a totally new way to do things. We had field requirements that were never there before. And we did our best to make it intuitive. Our pricing's complex. And so some things do require a little bit of training. So we coordinated this training with, hey, we're going to give you little chunks of the process and you're having little chunks of this. And then I like to use like a micro learning style. So we're not just boring people with 1 hour Zoom meetings for this training or that training, because nobody listens to that stuff and nobody watches recordings later, in my opinion. So it was really a coordinated effort because there were so many pieces to it, right? So we were putting in completely new systems, architecture. We're putting in a completely new process with a new methodology. So we're saying now we want to apply the new value framework we taught you, and we want to apply MedPick. So we have to look for MedPick. And so we had to embed that also within the deal. And it was a lot, and it takes time and it takes continuous improvement. So we've made a ton of improvements as we've gone. It's totally not perfect, but if you wait around for perfect, like you're never going to implement anything, in my opinion.
Yeah. And I always say, if you, like, when it comes to whether you're building a technology process or a piece of technology, whether you're rolling out a new process, anything like that, if you're not, I don't know, call it embarrassed by the V1 of something that you put out there, then you probably waited too long, right? I guess a couple of specifics on, I guess, like team size and like company size, because our folks like numbers and specifics here. So Patra has what, roughly like 3,000, 3,500 employees? Is that
worldwide? We do offshoring. We have our US team and then our India team and our Philippines team. In terms of folks here in the sales world, we have roughly 35 various roles that we support. Again, it's basically myself, our architect, and then an analyst, which we support the team with. So I try to be very engaged with the marketing team, the sales team. And then for us, our implementations team is a critical role in the organization. Like a SaaS company that might be dealing with more of an enterprise sale or custom product, we have a handoff process from, and I hate the word handoff. I can't even believe I just said it, but we then bring in our implementations team and work together with them to now get the customer trained and onboarded. And there's process building and a lot of work that goes into that. So that's a critical area for us. And the implementations team, there's another 30-ish folks over on the implementations team. And then obviously from there, it goes to our operations team. So there's a lot of hands in the cookie jar, if you will, as we get further down the process when we are working with the different teams on both sides of the organization. So this is where mapping out your deal teams internally and then mapping out your stakeholders externally in the organization is critical, because we're trying to make sure that we have the right people involved in the right kickoff meetings and all the different things. So we try to identify those up front through MEDPIC, through HubSpot, and we try to transition those as smoothly as possible. And we really do leverage our call recordings. Obviously, there's several of them out there. We use Gong, and it's really helpful for getting transcripts and action items and things, and also to share those calls for the folks that are going to be meeting with the customer in the next meeting. So all of that's been coordinated and orchestrated through myself and our head of RevTech that I mentioned, putting that together so we can make that happen. And we're constantly trying to improve it.
Yeah. So it sounds you've got, including yourself, a team of 3 supporting you essentially across marketing, sales, success, or implementation, a team of roughly 60-ish? 60
Yeah.
Okay. And you talked a little bit about mapping out process and what you just said. And obviously, I think that was one of the key components of kind of your definition of RevOps up front as well. And so I know one of the things that I feel like as people, especially folks in revenue operations that are dealing with technology on a daily basis, is that we can, I don't know, like skip over and like leapfrog and go directly to like the technology aspect of basically everything. So we go to the technology first, and then we try to basically do things based on what the technology can allow us or enable us to do, which is the wrong order, right? What you should be doing is looking at your process and the best way that, again, per your definition, that you can drive revenue faster, and then how your technology can help you do those things. So one, how can folks maybe avoid the trap of, I don't know, being technology first and skipping over that whole problem and process part of it? And then what are the ways that you found to be most successful as a revenue operator in mapping process to technology? And what are some of the like most important areas? If someone has not mapped out process to their tech stack today, like where do they even start? What's the best place for them to get rolling?
Yeah, great questions. So for the first part, I think the challenge is avoiding shiny objects, right? So like new marketing leaders, ooh, I want to get this tool, and they've got a budget, and then they go out and buy the tool. And then you're like, dude, why'd you get that tool? It doesn't even integrate with the CRM. And then now you've created another data silo. That happens so fast. It happens in startups like rampantly because everybody's got the license just to go get shit done. And they get a tool, and then pretty soon the free tool turns into a team tool, turns into an enterprise tool. Then you have 4 versions of the tool. I saw this in a prior world at Nimbus. We had 4 project management tools and didn't even know it. We had 2 instances of Monday with the marketing team. We had Smartsheet with the project management team, and then the product team had RoadMonk. So when I got there, I was like, dude, like we need to talk about this. So not only is there cost savings, but it was like dysfunctional. So it took about 6 months, but I got alignment and we narrowed it down. We ended up narrowing it down to 2 tools, 1 instance of Monday, and then project management team was just so far deep into Smartsheet. It didn't make sense to disrupt that. But anyway, so those things happen quickly. So I think it's avoiding the shiny object and go first to the tech that you have and see if you can get whatever you want to get accomplished through the tech that you have, right? Because it does happen quickly before you know it. And just because somebody has a budget doesn't mean that they should buy the tech. Something that I've done here and at prior organizations is go to the IT team, procurement, if you have it, and say, here's the definition of what would fall into RevTech. And those could be internal tools like project management tools. And so when somebody requests that from another department, it hits my radar and we have a discussion and we say, do we have a tool that will accomplish what you need? Because I think what happens is people, to the second part of your question, people get a tool without having a process first. And they think the tool is going to fix the problem. And then they sit on it for 6 months trying to implement it because they haven't built the process. They don't know what problem they're trying to solve. So it's just like sales. What problem am I trying to solve? And when you figure out what that is, then it's okay, what is the process to, what is the solution? What is the process? And then you figure out, okay, do I have the tech to implement this? First of all, do I need tech to implement it? Second, do I have the tech to implement it? And if I do, what does that look like? Or do I need to get tech? And then if you are buying new tech, you have to have your requirements. And I've got deal breakers. I've got non-negotiables. And HubSpot there are fewer tools that have awesome integrations with HubSpot. So that's my selection field. I look from those. If I can't see it at the deal level, don't talk to me about custom API hooks. Don't talk to me about all this other shit. I want it to see it at the deal. So the conversation just stops because I don't have the bandwidth. We've got a little team. I don't want to spend all my time developing. We need to be agile. Stuff changes. Like you said, the first version you're embarrassed about usually. You want to be agile, be able to change it. The market changes, process changes, you get feedback. You have to be able to be agile. Yeah, so a lot goes into it, but if you don't have the tech set up well, you're just going to frustrate the users. So you do have to think about it all the time, but it may not be the place that you start. You really need to think about what problem am I trying to solve, and is there a process that I need to put in place to fix it?
Yeah, and I think that's where the enablement part that you mentioned before is important, because I think the enablement is not just like training, like everyone defaults, it's training a new like salesperson, but it's like enablement is something that you continuously do, and it goes across the entire revenue team. And this is actually part of what enablement should do for the team, which is, hey, when you identify new problems that you have or that you're faced with, do not default immediately to assuming that you need some new piece of technology or some new product to do them for you. Instead, look at our current tech stack, tool A, tool B, tool C, right? These are the things you have at your disposal. See if you can solve that problem that you have with something that we're already using, already paying for, instead of just defaulting to, obviously, if this is a problem now, none of our current tools will solve for it, so I need to go out and buy something new, right? Because like you said, you're a small team, you can't possibly be involved in every single discussion, and you cannot prevent poor purchasing decisions from being made. So yeah, you need to train your team to be able to.
Yeah, I'm definitely annoying that way. So I definitely get outside of my swim lane and get involved in other conversations. But I try to communicate, I try to build relationships and talk to them about the why, and say, nobody's trying to stop you or control whatever fiefdom you're trying to build, but we want to make sure that we're able to communicate, work together. And if we silo out with a different system, it's just going to create problems down the road that you may not see right now. But yeah, I mean, I think you mentioned enablement. It's important to bring in the enablement leader folks, whoever is playing that role in the organization, whether it's in the marketing org, sales, customer success, bring them into the process, get the feedback, have that close collaboration, because if you are looking to solve a problem, a lot of times they can provide different insight. They can be the conduit to sales. I usually have a couple of sales managers and sales executives that I tap to look at stuff and say, hey, does this make sense to you? I'll grab them on chat or something like that and just say, can you jump on quick and look at this? And so I think it's so important to have the people involved as you're considering process changes, and not just like shoving it down, and get their input on the tech that they're using and what all that stuff looks like as you're trying to think about new things or rolling out new things. Yeah.
And the other part I liked about what you brought up, it especially gets back to the alignment piece of what we were talking about, is one, you don't need to own everything in order to be able to drive alignment. You mentioned like you're including you're a team of 3, and you've got partnerships across all of the go-to-market teams that you support, marketing, sales, post-sale, implementation. You partner with folks on the IT, the procurement team for those sort of like rev tech purchasing requests, and on the enablement side as well. So that's another thing, is that aligning the teams that you need to be an effective revenue operator does not mean completely owning everything that falls under that, I don't know, called scope, set of responsibility. You can be very effective without that.
Definitely. And that's why you have to be a good internal salesperson, right? Building those relationships, collaborating cross-functionally in the organization is critical. I have a really great relationship with our head. We have it's called the DART team, Data and Analytics and Reporting team that reports up to finance. We do a lot of our own reporting, but they manage a lot of like the billings and all the things that systems that tech that I don't manage. So I have a really close relationship with that team, and we meet regularly. They support some of our needs in Tableau and other things. I think building as a RevOps leader or people who are looking to grow their career in RevOps, you have to be a good collaborator, and you have to be good at building relationships with other people. Because initially when you go meet with another VP in another department, people sometimes can think, oh, this might be a threat to the way that I do things today. And let's face it, we all have jobs, unless we are the CEO or we own the company. We all have jobs and are getting a paycheck. So there's a people element in building those relationships and demonstrating that, hey, this is what the revenue journey looks like. Here's the part you own. How can we work together and help each other and collaborate and remove the friction? Because ultimately, if we're doing a service to the company, we're helping our customers, putting the customer in the center. So I try to bring the topic up that way and educate about revenue operations when I am working with these leaders. So I'm always on a PR mission as a head of RevOps. I have been since the day that I started. I'll make little videos and send them out. I'll jump on people's meetings. I'll hit them on chat, text, whatever it is, their personal way of communicating. I think that's so important because every company is going to have a different structure. There's no perfect RevOps structure and RevOps role. So I think you have to take it upon yourself to build those relationships and focusing in on those friction areas where there might be silos, and how do you bridge those silos with people, process, and technology?
Yeah. I guess one more kind of RevOps related question for you. So you mentioned, you got a team of 3, you're supporting a team of 60-ish. Let's talk about like reporting up. So who do you report up to, and how have you found getting like executive alignment or buy-in to revenue operations? What has that experience been like?
So I report to the CRO. So we have a very close relationship, and the CRO is responsible for product, marketing, and sales. And then the head of operations runs implementation. So I also have a close relationship with him. And then there's also finance, which we work really closely together, particularly around compensation and board meetings and prep and things like that. But I do report to the CRO, but my day-to-day involves more than just the CRO team. It's really in those worlds. As example, next week we're meeting with the sales leaders and implementations leaders, and we're having like a workshop to work through some improvements that we want to make in terms of our kickoffs, our onboarding, our transitions from sales to implementation. It's a proactive meeting. There's all the right people are going to be in the room, and we've done a lot of prep for it. So we're a remote company, so we try to do some in-persons, and bonding and stuff like that is super important as well. So we're doing that next week.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. And I love one that you mentioned, CRO owning product marketing and sales. I love that you see a lot of CROs that are really just like VPs of sales or heads of sales. So clearly doing things right there. And then again, you get back to the alignment piece we talked about, knowing that, okay, head of operations, CFO on the finance side and the finance department, there's tons of other teams that you need to drive alignment with and work closely with in order to get that job done. So it all makes sense. I have two other questions for you
Mhm.
before I let you run. One, you mentioned that you were on the sales side at Yellow Pages. So
Oh, it was 100 years ago, but yeah.
I know, but what's the biggest deal or most interesting deal you closed
Oh
while at
God, way back
Yellow
then.
Pages? Yeah, way back.
So I won, I still have, I think I posted about it somewhere on LinkedIn. I won the trip one year, and my buddy Wes, we were on the same team, and it was like old school. We were like dialing for dollars. So you would get a stack of basically leads, and we were going for this trip, and it was like you had to have a certain number of deals and you'd have to have a certain revenue. But
Yeah,
I remember I was selling attorneys was a big deal in Yellow Pages because they would take out these giant ads, and I knew like I was definitely like analytical minded because I knew if I booked 2 appointments a day, I could close at least one of them so I could have a deal a day.
yeah,
And the deal was you wanted to get a deal a day because you qualify for whatever spiff they would have that week or something like that. And then I probably shouldn't say this, but I just would like not work after that because I was like, dude, I just
yeah,
closed these deals. And if I
yeah,
closed two, that was even better. So some weeks I'd have 8 or 10 deals. But I had this meeting with an attorney, and I was pitching this front cover, which was a big deal. It was going to be my biggest sale. And back then, you would write out the contract. So you'd write out 3 versions because you want them to sign it whenever they say yes. So you'd obviously pitch
yeah,
the biggest version first. And there's that thing they say in sales, like he or she who speaks first loses. And one of the things that happened as I pitched this and it was time to close, you have the pen there. I swear to you, it was like 3 or 5 solid minutes. I remember looking at this clock in his stuffy office where I just shut up. I didn't say anything because he was thinking about it. And
yeah,
if I'd have spoke and said, I have this other version for you that's a little bit
yeah, yeah.
less, I would have probably left a ton of money on the table. But it was the most awkward silence. It was so long, but he signed the thing, he shook my hand, and it was like, dude, I was so pumped when I left. I'll never forget that. That was like my
Yeah.
first like really big deal, and I couldn't wait to run back to the office and rub it in Wes's face. We both went on the cruise that year, Wes and I have a picture somewhere, but
That's
it
awesome.
was definitely like early in my sales career because that was my first real like hunter job where like at the end of the week they would fire people if you didn't. Every 2 weeks, if you were below a certain line, you got a 2 week notice, and then we called it the green mile. They'd be walking people out the door every week, so it was
Yeah,
really competitive. So I think like my roots are very competitive. I get sales, obviously sales has changed, and I've led teams over the years, and obviously we're in a different world with technology and things like that. But some of those fundamental like competitive, fundamental, basic sales skills like listening, actively listening, and speaking when appropriate. Don't talk too much, rattle your, like I am right now, listen right to your prospects. And those things apply today. But yeah, that was fun.
that's
That was
awesome.
that was a fun one.
Yeah, Wes, if you're listening, in your face, man.
Yeah.
Sandy,
Yeah.
Sandy
That's right.
totally
In your
beat
face.
you.
Yeah, he'll tell you I think he ended up getting number one because he sold more deals, but I had more revenue. And so it was like he was
Yeah,
first, I was second, but I think my check was bigger if I remember. But
yeah,
yeah, it was
that's
like
awesome.
literally every day we'd be like pounding each other, like, what'd you get?
Yeah,
What'd you get?
yeah, I love that. And then I like to ask one kind of non-work, non-RevOps related question to close things out. So one, are you a podcast or a music person, or both, or neither? And then I guess depending on your answer, assuming you pick at least one, what's your kind of favorite podcast or band?
Okay, so those are good questions. I love podcasts in the morning while like running. When I jog in the morning, it keeps my mind
Yeah,
focused. I listen to a couple of speaking podcasts. One is Speaking Your Brand. I love Mel Robbins. She's got a good pod. I listen to this pod, number of RevOps podcasts. So I have quite a few. So if the new episode is on, it pops up. I enjoy that because it just keeps my mind like on something productive. I feel like I can do something productive while I'm jogging. And then it also takes my mind off the pain of jogging because I force myself to
true.
do it every day. I don't love it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Music wise, I don't know, man. I'm old school. I'm stuck in the 90s. I love like Beastie Boys. This is one of my
nice.
faves. And I don't know. I like
Yeah.
lots of stuff.
No, I like that. I mean, yeah, like I don't know, I guess I came of age, if you will, in like the early mid 2000s. So all of the like emo punk stuff is like still what I listen to. And now when my kids ask me, I just tell them that it's classic rock. They're gonna have to be okay with that.
That's funny.
Thanks for dropping some knowledge on us, Sandy. Everything from closing Yellow Pages deals way back in the day to setting up a RevOps function and being a small but mighty team to again, podcasts and music. This was fun, so thank you very much for being on and dropping some insights for us.
Awesome. Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for tuning in to today's episode, everybody.
For more great content like this, join our community at RevOpsCoop.com and check out the links provided in the show notes.
Keep it RevOpsAF, y'all.